You know, when I said I was going to do a response to Doug's Disney Simba for this year, I meant it. One thing his Disney Simba for this year has raised is a big question, and that is, were most of these Disney direct-to-video sequels were they meant to be movie pilots for animated series, for potential animated series? Were these Disney direct-to-video sequels meant to be pilots for a Disney animated series? Because you see, when you look at the Return of Jafar, which Doug talked about and I've responded to, the way he admitted how it ended on a cliffhanger, only to find out a few days later that it's continuing. A few days later, that it was meant that Return of Jafar was really nothing more than a 66-minute or 67-minute movie pilot for the Aladdin series. One has to ask that question. Was that the purpose of the other Disney animated sequels that came afterwards, and even the mid-quels or prequels, or mid-quels mostly, was that the purpose of the sequels and mid-quels, to be pilots for potential animated series? You take a look at Belle's Magical World, which is one of the biggest targets when this question comes up, and a lot of people will say that Belle's Magical World is a good example of this. They pretty much say that Belle's Magical World, when you watch it the first time, like you didn't even have to look online about why, or ask around why it was presented the way it was. It was presented the way it was because even back when it came out, pretty much people saw that it was nothing more than a pilot. It was nothing more than a compilation movie comprised of 3 episodes of a potential but shot down Beauty and the Beast animated series. And the reason it was shot down, in my opinion, is because unlike Aladdin, Aladdin had all sorts of locations they can go to around the world. With Beauty and the Beast, you only had 2, the castle and the forest, and that was it. You didn't have anywhere else. And there was not so much you can do, especially if your series was going to be patterned after, or sort of in the same vein as 101 Dalmatians, where a majority of your episodes were going to comprise of 2 11-minute shorts in 22. We're going to comprise of 2 11-minute shorts, in a 22-minute time slot. The people that they probably presented this to, probably said, hey, there is potential, but you're limited. You're very, very limited. And I think some other people thought, hey, Beauty and the Beast and even its mid-quel follow-up, The Enchanted Christmas, they're perfect the way they are. We don't need any more. Just leave it. Because I think, in a sense, when someone pitched the idea to do a series, I think somebody probably said, yeah, it's potentially great, but we don't want to water it down. We don't want to ruin a great franchise. A franchise that was nominated for an Academy Awards was nominated for Best Picture in the Academy Awards. We don't want to do that. So that's why we didn't get a Beauty and the Beast television series, in my opinion. Because one, you only were limited to 2 locations, and there's only so much you can do. And 2, they probably didn't want to ruin one of the best franchises at that time. So even though there was potential behind it, because of the fact that it got all these accolades, and even though Lion King was good to get one, to get a nomination, it didn't. Beauty and the Beast did. Because it was perfect all the way around, they didn't want to ruin that. And they didn't want to ruin the fact that it had the reputation of being, at that time, the only animated movie to get nominated for Best Picture. They didn't want to ruin that opportunity. They didn't want to ruin it. So that's why you didn't see a Beauty and the Beast animated series. But then the question still gets asked. When you look at all the other sequels that followed Return of Jafar, like Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, was that meant to be a movie pilot for a series? Well, we got the Timon and Pumbaa series after it, but Timon and Pumbaa followed up more like a mid-quel series to the Lion King movie itself, as well as Simba's Pride, than anything else, because there were some animated shorts that had Simba involved. So, they did get something out of it, but it was Timon and Pumbaa. And then to follow that up with basically a from but then to follow that up with basically the Lion King 2, the Lion King 1.5, which is basically a Timon and Pumbaa perspective of how things happened. Didn't really help much to do a Lion King series. So they probably called off on that one for a while until later on we have the Lion Guard. And the reason we have the Lion Guard now is because of the fact that you gave it time. People probably washed away the memory of Lion King 1.5, and they look at the Lion Guard and the Lion Guard television series as the true follow-up to Simba's Pride, not 1.5, which was nothing more than a parody, a comedy, if you will, point of view, a comedic parody point of view of the Lion King movie. So they looked at more like Lion Guard as a true follow-up and just erased Lion King 1.5 from the memories. Yeah, I know Doug's going to potentially get to it, but it's like, honestly, people would rather have Lion Guard over that. But was Lion King 2 meant to be that setup? I don't think so. I think what they wanted to do was just have the follow-up to Lion King 2, the follow-up to Lion King, because they wanted something to, even if it was direct-to-video, to follow in its footsteps and be looked at as a great follow-up, as a decent follow-up, and one of the biggest direct-to-video sellers, which it was, and that's what they got. Animation quality and everything helped out. They got something that could stand side by side with the Lion King as one big story. So it works. It really works. But then you take a look at Pocahontas 2, Journey to a New World. Was that meant to be a pilot? Was that being made as a potential pilot for a Pocahontas animated series? Well, from what Doug described in his review of it, during the middle of the movie, Pocahontas 2, it all seems to be done very well. It's like, animation-wise and storytelling-wise, everything just seems to flow good. It's like, basically says the only thing wrong with it was like a little bit of the beginning and a bit of the end. But the rest was good. So was Pocahontas 2 meant to be a sequel? Well, they gave her a new love interest instead of John Smith. But that was about, they introduced sort of a bodyguard character that stayed behind. And this new love interest went in his place. So, Pocahontas going to get it? Was Journey to a New World meant to be a movie pilot? I'd have to say that Pocahontas 2 was not meant to be one. I think it passes as basically being, just like what Lion King 2 was at the time, as just a follow-up to Pocahontas came before it and become one, and basically allowed to stand side by side with it as one big story arc, just like Lion King and Lion King 2. But then you take a look at Hunchback of Notre Dame 2. Hunchback of Notre Dame, Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame, was good the way it was, despite how some people may feel it was controversial of the subject it was tackling and stuff like that. Hunchback of Notre Dame was good all the way around. Doug even liked it. And heck, I remember watching it in theaters, and I like it. But here's the thing. When it was announced that a sequel was coming out, even I wondered, why are they doing a sequel? I mean, I admit I wanted to give it a chance, even though I haven't really seen it that much. And there could be some good elements to it. But when you have a different animation studio like TMS out of Japan helping you with the animation, or helping you do the animation, or doing the animation period, just the way it's presented at times, I think Doug pointed out best. You're basically watching, it seemed like you weren't watching a sequel or a follow-up to Hunchback of Notre Dame. You were watching a Disney Afternoon movie based on a Disney Afternoon series. That's what you were doing. You were watching a 2-hour movie based on a Disney Afternoon series during the Disney Afternoon time slot. that's what you were watching. So just by hearing Doug say something like that, it gives me the impression, and I'm sure others may have seen it this way, because when you think about it, Hunchback of Notre Dame 2 didn't get well received. I think it didn't. I don't think it did very well, because I think when Doug says something like that, it gets me thinking, and I'm sure it got the critics thinking at the time, that this sequel, it's nothing more than a movie pilot for a potential Hunchback of Notre Dame series, which never got off the ground. But I think that's why Hunchback of Notre Dame 2 didn't do so well, because it was, when you think about it, the way it was animated, the way it introduced a new character, the way it introduced a new villain, and the fact that there are potential other threats besides Frodo. It basically, to maybe the critics' eyes and even those that watched it, it showed that it was nothing more than a movie pilot, not just a sequel to a very beautifully well done and if not controversial film in Hunchback of Notre Dame. But it showed that Hunchback of Notre Dame 2 was nothing more than not just a sequel, but a movie pilot to a potential Hunchback of Notre Dame series. That's why I don't think it did so well, because of the fact of who animated it, the way it was presented, the way it introduced a new character, the way it kind of pushed Phoebus and Esmeralda to the side, introduced the son in their place, like I say, introduced a new love interest for Quasimodo, introduced the fact that there were more threats outside of, more threats, outside of Notre Dame besides Frodo. To me, I think a lot of people looked at it, and just by what, like I said, I know I'm repeating myself here, but just by the fact that Doug said, "Hey, it looks like you're watching a Disney afternoon movie," it's the fact that I think a lot of people perceived it that way, like they were watching a movie pilot for a potential Hunchback of Notre Dame series that never got off the ground. So that's why when I look at Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, I look at basically something. I don't look at just a sequel, but when one thinks about it, I look at basically a movie pilot for what would have been a potential Hunchback of Notre Dame series that never got the green light. And then you look at the other sequels like Mulan 2. Now, I haven't watched Mulan 2. I know Doug hasn't touched upon it yet. But is Mulan 2 in that same category? Well, just by the fact that some of the animation style is, television animation, and the fact it introduces 3 new characters, potential love interests maybe for the other 3 characters that were introduced in the first film, I should say, you're looking at how it's, what the story's about and everything. And again, I haven't watched it, but from what I can see, I think it too follows in that same in that same category as Hunchback of Notre Dame. I look at something that, even though it's a direct sequel and follow-up, that it's nothing more than a movie pilot for a potential Mulan series. I think that's what it was meant to be. Just like Hunchback of Notre Dame is conceived and looked at as the same way, not just by me, but by others. I think Mulan 2, in my opinion, is looked at it the same way. Its story was probably a lot better. The animation quality was a lot better, but it was looked at probably in the same vein. Just the way it was animated, just like I say, the way the story was and everything. So I think when you look at Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, and then the other direct-to-video sequel, Mulan 2, you're looking at 2, not just direct-to-video sequels and follow-ups to 2 good movies, but you're looking at 2 basically straight-out movie pilots for what would have been potential Disney animated series that never got the green light, that didn't get as far as just these direct-to-video sequels. Because these direct-to-video sequels for these 2 movies were meant to be just the beginning of those animated series that would have came, but never did. So the Mulan 2 kind of follows up in that same category. But you look at all the other ones like Tarzan and Jane. Yeah, Tarzan and Jane is nothing more than a compilation movie tossed in with some new footage. That's all it is. Tarzan 2 is served as a mid-quel to the movie. So it gets a pass a little bit because it's telling you what's going on. So like Bambi 2. Bambi 2 is a mid-quel in a sense. Even though some people feel like, why do we need a mid-quel? Same with Fox and the Hound too. But still, they're done in a way to kind of, I guess, expand on the story. Like, okay, what happened in between this time frame? And you could even say, when you look at Bambi 2 and you look at Fox and Hound 2, you could say that maybe they follow in those same categories. That maybe these were not just meant to be mid-quels to kind of expand on the story that happens, it's supposed to happen in between of, that it's supposed to also give you an idea of what potentially could be an animated series. I mean, you take a look at the way both movies are presented. Both movies are presented gorgeously. Don't get me wrong. I have both films. But when one looks at the way they're done, the way you introduce new characters, you have more interaction. Like in Bambi, you have more interaction with Bambi and Pauline as young does or young fawns and everything. So you're set, and even the way it ends and all that, you're setting up you're not just setting up an expansion for the original movie, but just setting up, basically, in my opinion, an animated series. Just the way you got this group of characters together, hanging out as they grow up. To me, as much as I love Bambi 2, and who doesn't, Bambi 2 was not just served as a mid-quel to kind of expand on the Bambi movie. It was serving as a sequel, as a pilot to a potential Bambi animated series. Same with Fox and the Hound 2. Fox and the Hound 2 was done perfectly. I mean, Fox and the Hound, I should say, was done perfectly. There's no doubt. There's no need for a follow-up. Well, maybe a follow-up if you wanted to do it. But there was no need for a mid-quel for Fox and the Hound 2. There was no reason for that. I'll give it that. But they did it because there was probably discussions at a potential Fox and the Hound animated series. And that's why it was done. Because you introduced new characters that were probably going to stick around. Just like in Bambi. So you introduced the concept of newer adventures, just like in Bambi 2. So you were basically presenting right then and there the fact that you were setting up, that you were using your mid-quel of Fox and Hound 2, just like with Bambi 2, as setups for as a setup for a potential Fox and Hound animated series. That's all it was. Because just the way it's presented, yes, both movies are animated beautifully. Don't get me wrong. Both movies are animated beautifully, but everybody always asks the question of why they were even made. Why they were even made. I mean, Bambi, they can understand because they want to see that more interaction between Bambi and his dad. And sort of get an expansion on it and kind of see what happens in between after the mother dies and what happens as, time goes on and Bambi grows up. They want to see what happens. But yet, the way it's done in a way that you're basically setting up, you're basically not just expanding on the movie and on the story that it's centered in, takes place in the middle of, I should say, but you're basically presenting a pilot for an animated series that takes place in between the original movie as well. Again, same with Fox and the Hound 2. So basically, even though they're mid-quels, they follow in that same category as Hunchback 2 and Mulan 2. They follow in that same category of, hey, we're not just mid-quels or continuations of the story, even though we take place in the middle of original films. We're also the movie pilots. For potential animated series. That's what they were. Nothing more. Even though they were animated beautifully, they were nothing more than movie pilots for animated series. So when you look at it in a sense, Return of Jafar, Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, Mulan 2, those were three sequels. One that continued on into an animated series, and two that were basically being presented as pilots, as the beginnings of potential new animated series, pilots, if you will. That's three. Like I said, one that went into an animated series, and then two that were presented in a similar fashion but never got their animated series. And then you look at Bambi 2 and Fox and Hound 2, and that's basically five movies that served as nothing more than whose sequels, and in the case of Bambi 2 and Fox and Hound 2, served as being mid-quells. You're looking potentially at five movies altogether that served as pilots for potential animated series, with one in Aladdin having an animated series to follow up on, but the other four you didn't get any, even though you knew they were setting up for it. I don't know how else to explain it. I mean, even Tangled's getting an animated series, but they're getting it after Tangled Ever After, and the only thing that catches people's eyes is the Rapunzel's hair's back. So how are they going to explain that? Does it grow magically back because she still has, because she still has that power, she still has that flower's power inside of her, and so even though it's cut, it's going to slowly start to magically grow back. Is she suddenly going to wake up and her hair's back? How are they going to explain this? You know what I'm saying? How are they going to explain it? So, to me, even Tangled got a television series, but its pilot was done, I think, in a more appropriate way. It was done with an animated short. It was done with a 7 to 11 minute short, and that was it, which was Tangled Ever After. That was it. It was done in a way that it was allowed to be given more legs to run on. So, to me, the answer to the question, are these direct-to-video sequels, were these Disney direct-to-video sequels nothing more than movie being presented? Were these Disney direct-to-video sequels nothing more than movie pilots for potential Disney animated series? And I have to say yes, and I have to say no. The no being on the fact that Lion King 2 was supposed to close out the thing. That was it. Lion King, they close out that chapter of Lion King, basically bring it full circle, if you will, at that time. Now you got Lion Guard, which is continuing on the franchise, but they waited. Here's the thing, but think about it this way. They waited to do that. They waited years and years to see if maybe people wanted to see a continuation of Lion King, and that's what they're getting. So Lion King 2 at the time, along with was supposed to bring the whole story full circle. Pocahontas 2, despite how you feel about it, was meant to do the same thing. But you take a look, like I said, Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, Mulan 2, you take a look at the mid-quells of Bambi 2 and Fox and the Hound 2, and you're looking at not just some good, in the case of Bambi 2 and Fox and the Hound 2, good continuations and expansions of stories that we've already seen, especially in the middle of them. But along with the two that were supposed to be follow-ups, you're looking at basically 4 movie pilots to potential animated series that never got off the ground. Just the way they were presented, just the fact that they introduced new characters and everything. You potentially had movie pilots. You potentially were showcasing movie pilots or pilots, period, for new Disney animated series that never got off the ground or never got greenlit. That's about it. And I know I sound like I'm repeating myself a lot, but what I'm trying to get at is some of these, the ones that I've talked about, what I'm trying to get at is that yes, there were some direct-to-video movies that were basically meant to be movie pilots for a potential Disney animated series that either did get off the ground and got a series or didn't. And there were some that were just meant to be follow-ups to bring the story arc of the movie that they were a continuation of full circle. That's all they were. So, again, were these Disney direct-to-video sequels meant to be movie pilots? Pilots for Disney animated series? Yes and no. But before I go, I will say this, okay? If you're going to do a sequel to a movie, or a mid-quel to a movie, Do it in a correct manner. Take a look at Goofy Movie. Goofy Movie and Extremely Goofy Movie take place after Goof Troop. So the sequel to Goofy Movie gets a pass because it takes place afterwards. Hercules, the animated series, is a mid-quel series to Hercules, the movie. Takes place in between the movie, takes place, while he's in high school, while he's in training. Yeah, there are some questionable decisions here and there. About, Hades being in it and, all this and that. But still, it served its purpose. And yeah, it did get a direct-to-video movie, but it got it basically after the series was over, and it was basically a best of compilation. That's all it was. That's all it was. So, it gets a pass as well. So when one looks at it, in a way, if you're going to do, like I said, if you're going to do sequels, if you're going to do movies that are going to be either, basically, if you're going to do anything, like a sequel or a movie based on something, make sure that movie and maybe its potential sequel are used as follow-ups and, is used as follow-ups and closure to that franchise, to whatever you're continuing. All right? Let's take a look at, let's say, Bonkers. I know people like and hate Bonkers, don't get me wrong. But when Bonkers came out, when you think about it, its 1 hour pilot was going bonkers. Its sequel episode, which was a transitional 30-minute episode, was New Partners on the Block. Now, if they wanted to continue it on and say, okay, we got to bring this series complete full closure, they could have done a direct-to-video movie, and that would have brought it as a finale, and they could have done it and that could have brought it closure. But let's say that movie finale did so well that say, hey, we want another Bonkers movie, so we're not going to say, so we're going to continue the story, and then that one's going to be the finale. Then that would have worked. Get what I'm saying? Or let's put it this way: let's say they wanted to do a direct-to-video movie on Bonkers, but still continue the series, but still continue that story that they got in the movie on into another film, which is going to serve as a sequel and as closure and the finale to the series. That's how you do it. That works. That's passable. I'm not saying, Pocahontas 2 and Lion King 2 were not passable, because they were direct video follow-ups and they had closure. The other ones, as good and as bad as some people may look at them, even though they were supposed to be direct follow-ups or continuations, expansions of the original story, even though they're supposed to be expansions of the original story taking place in between it, they wouldn't, even though they might be good or bad, they were nothing more than movie pilots for a potential Disney animated series. I know people don't like to hear that. I know some of you are getting sick and tired of me repeating myself, but that's a fact. That's the truth. So this audio video has gone long enough, so I'm just going to end it here and say, yes, I'm going to end it right here and say that yes and no. When Disney, started doing these direct-to-video movies, direct-to-video animated sequels, I should say, that yes and no, some were and some were not meant to be movie pilots for potential Disney animated series. So that's all I'm going to say. I know this took a long time. I'll probably put in the description box that this is a long one. So just let me know what you guys think. Take your time. Hopefully, as I mentioned in the description box, you've taken your time listening to this. And sorry if I rambled on it a few times, but just wanted to get my point across. And I will talk to you all later. Comment below, and I'm out.